Hi, this is Varun. I'm super excited to have a podcast and my first podcast with one of my favorite persons. Her name is Lari Powell. She is Riverview STEM Academy Principal, and she has been working with Folsom Cordova School District for over 20 years as a teacher, administrator. And let's get started, Mrs. Powell.
Okay.
And first of all, thank you very much for agreeing for this podcast, and you're my inspiration to start podcasts.
Good.
My first question would be like, what's your childhood like? How was it growing up?
So growing up, I did not come from a home that was very educated. So my dad had learning disabilities, and this was when schools didn't really know what to do with learning disabilities, and he struggled to learn how to read, and so he got routed into kind of like what they would call now special day classes. But back then, once you were routed to special day classes, they weren't teaching you anything anymore. They just sort of gave up on you, and they were just sort of housing you. And so school wasn't a good experience for him. He felt like that he wasn't smart or capable of learning. So he left school early and started working. And when he entered the workforce, he realized he actually can learn very fast. My dad is in construction, and we built our own house. Most of the work was done by him. So he's actually very smart. He's constantly tinkering, building things, optimizing things. But he had a learning disability. So going through school, there was a lot of, that was like the family secret. There was a lot of shame because as a child, he didn't learn how to read. Also, he had to work physical labor jobs, so he worked very, very hard. So we didn't have a lot of money. When he was an adult, he decided that he wanted to get his contractor's license, so he was really motivated to learn how to read. And I believe he went through a program with the public library system. It was an adult literacy program. And he learned to read, and he got his contractor's license and was able to have more choices about what he did and how much he made. But he always stressed education. He was always very impressed and respected people with an education. School and learning came really easy to me. I entered kindergarten already reading. So he had a lot of hope that I would get a college degree, that I would get a good job. He saw a lot of potential. So that was, even though I didn't know the pathway to getting there, that was the expectation, and that's what I did.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Did you aspire to become a teacher from a young age?
Yes. So I loved school because I was good at it. It came easy to me, and I really liked it. And I was very, very shy in school, but learning came easy. So it was a comfortable place for me. And so I would say from probably second grade, I really liked my second grade teacher, and she had the same last name as me. And so I started seeing myself like maybe I could be a teacher. My last name was Miller, so this was Miss Miller. And I thought, well, maybe I could be a teacher like her. And she would get the class in a circle with the acoustic guitar. This is in the 70s. And we would sing like folk music. I just remember I loved that class and loved that teacher. And I thought that, and she would give me a lot of praise for being a good student. So I thought that maybe I could be a teacher. And that just followed throughout school. Anytime I had a good teacher, and I had a lot of them, I would think that's what I want to do, or that's what I want to be. And so when I first graduated from high school, I had pretty good grades. I was in National Honor Society. I was in the Spanish club. I did a lot of things. But we were in a very rural community, and I knew about college, but I didn't know how to apply. I didn't know there was such a thing as financial aid. We just knew that college costs money, and we didn't have money. My parents worked very hard, and it was all they could do to feed and house us. And so when I first left high school, all my teachers would say, oh, you could be anything you want and you could go to college, but I had no idea how I was going to pay for it. So I just worked and worked similar jobs as my parents, physical jobs. And it was when I had my oldest child that I decided I can't work like this. I can't leave this child with childcare. And even I couldn't afford childcare, and so it was a good point in my life to stop what I was doing and really think about what I wanted. And so then when I pursued college as an adult, I had neighbors that told me, well, maybe you could qualify for financial aid, or maybe you could get a scholarship, or I didn't know about any of those things. And so everything just lined up. I got financial aid. I got a few scholarships. Once I started college, I got good grades, and then got more scholarships, and it just kind of flowed.
That's inspiring. I'm sure Mrs. Miller must be very proud of you. Does she know that you're a...
Well, unfortunately, she's passed, but I loved that class. It was a great class.
Okay, great. What influenced you to become a part of STEM Academy staff in the beginning when they started the pilot project?
Well, I think a few things. I always liked math and science. When I was in college, I was going to teach middle school math and science, and I had that in my mind that that's what I was going to do. I loved math. But when I started seeking full-time employment, it was the year that they did the class size reduction. So all of the jobs were at the elementary level, and especially first and second grade. And so I just went where the jobs were. And I didn't picture myself teaching first and second grade, but I loved it. Once I got there, I loved it. But I always tried to infuse a lot of math and science. In my summers, I would teach remedial algebra at the high school, and just tried to figure out how to bring that into my elementary class as well, my love of math and science. So I also, because I grew up poor, I taught in poor schools. I was at a school that had 100% free and reduced lunch for a long time. And I went into it thinking, I know the pathway out of poverty. I know what to do and how to lead these kids out, but it was very, very hard, very discouraging, because if you don't have family support, it's really hard for children to overcome that and to move to a better education or a better outcome. But I realized that having a STEM background was the most likely skill that you could have to get out of poverty in one generation. If you have that, if you leave our school system with that, then the industry will forgive a lot of things. They'll forgive that your English isn't perfect, or that you maybe have some disabilities. There's a lot of things that they'll forgive because that skill is so sought after. And so as I went through, I was spending more and more time on that. I also thought back to my high school. I went to a high school the first year it was built, and it it was at a time when nobody had a computer. Nobody. There might be one computer in a school office. But because we were a new school, we had a computer lab, and we had one teacher that knew how to use it. And it was 0 period because it wasn't accredited. It was that new. And my dad said, this is the wave of the future. If you can learn how to use a computer and how to program, then you're set for life. And so I went to this 0 period, and that's when a computer did nothing. It was a black screen with a yellow light, flashing light, and you had to program everything to make it do the tiniest task. And so I didn't really see the value in that until I went to college. And then because I had a background, I was able to get a job in the computer science department office. So I knew that skill was a life changer for me, and my skill was very limited. So if I could bring that excitement, that confidence, and that experience to these kids in my school, that they would have a better chance of moving into a higher quality of life. So I was doing family STEM nights. I was doing, in my after school club, I had homework club, which they hated, but I would reward them if they did their homework or they did their lessons. Then they got to play Legos or Connects or all these STEM toys. So I was doing a lot of that in the school already. And then when I found out that they were opening a STEM academy and that it was in Rancho Cordova, where a lot of kids aren't exposed to these kinds of things, I knew I had to join.
Yeah, that's nice. We are lucky to have a STEM school in our neighborhood, And will early exposure to STEM program or projects help influence the kids to choose STEM careers?
Absolutely. So I think one of the best things about this school is that we're pulling families from all over, different backgrounds, and different income levels, different levels of education. But because we're a STEM school, we attract a lot of STEM families. And so I think it's really powerful for kids that maybe don't come from a STEM family to see people that are working in that career. Like, there was a lot of careers that I didn't know existed until I was in college that I might have pursued. I like logistics manager. I've always liked, the if then this, if that then this. I've always loved those things, and but I didn't know that there could be a job attached to that, or environmental sciences. I've always really had a passion for nature, animals, plants, and I didn't have any idea what job was attached to that. So all of these things the kids here get because the families bring those experiences. I also think that if you come from a family that maybe has advantages and a lot of education and really good jobs, and you're in the classroom with a child that does not come from that background, it builds empathy. And it builds a sense that this is a human being, just like I am, and they have value and they contribute meaningfully to these projects and the classroom. So I think I think one of the best things about the school is just the diversity of backgrounds, and I think it's very advantageous for kids that don't come from that background.
Yeah, that's a good opportunity for those kids. And then the PLTW program has been here for like several years, right? How has the program helped the kids? Have you seen the change in these kids?
Yes.
Okay.
So Project Lead the Way, what's interesting is how it's evolved over time. Every year they add more, it gets better. I like the pairing of, it overlaps with engineering, next generation science standards, and the computer science standards. So it integrates all of that. I think that's really powerful because they have different interests, and it might be the engineering that sets them on that pathway, or it might be the science that sets them on the pathway, or the computer science. But Project Lead the Way has all of that. And I think having that exposure from kindergarten builds a confidence and an identity that cannot be achieved if we start in middle school with this stuff. So when I was here and I was teaching first grade, I had kids in my class that could code, but they couldn't read. They were learning to code before they could read. And I thought, that is the economy that we're entering. That is such an essential skill. And so I feel like Project Lead the Way does a really good job of capturing them when they're little. It's very engaging, and then it builds over time. So the rigor of what they learn here, especially by like 4th and 5th grade, is like high school level material, and it's not just engineering, but it's also science and computer science. I think that it's pivotal, and the training that they provide. Every teacher here has to go to master level training. So Project Lead the Way wants one teacher on campus to be trained as a master teacher to help all of the other teachers. And at Riverview, every teacher here is a master teacher. So that training also, you can come here as a teacher with very limited STEM background, but as long as you're willing and you have a passion for it, and you go to training like Project Lead the Way, you learn so much. So it's been foundational.
Yeah, that's interesting. My daughter is always excited. She used to come home with those 3D structures, which are like really, really interesting. And I'm glad that she got that exposure early on in her life. Now I'm slowly diverting into a different aspect. What role does a teacher play in kids' life, especially in elementary school, where they are exposed to one teacher throughout the year and they're little, easy to mold?
I think it's huge impact. I think the only person that impacts a child more than their parent is their teacher. And especially if it's a good teacher that spends a lot of time connecting with children. There's been a lot of studies that show that children learn a lot more from teachers they feel connected to. They'll work harder and they'll achieve more when they feel connected to their teacher. But I think I think that relationship, that teacher-student relationship, is so intimate, especially with at the elementary level. And I've talked to a lot of people where they'll say, I don't remember who my dentist was or who my pediatrician was, or all of these people, but they can remember every single teacher they had, especially at the elementary level, and how that teacher impacted them. So it is huge. And we are experiencing a teacher shortage right now in California. And I tell people that are thinking about going into teaching, there's no other career where you're going to impact children more. And the feeling that gives you, I can't imagine you would get from any other career.
Yeah, I know it needs a lot of grit and patience, to be an elementary school teacher. And when I ask my daughter, she can't pick one teacher among the 6 teachers that she has been with Riverview. And I loved each and every one in our school, and I'm proud to say that Riverview has provided the best to my daughter, and it's the best decision that I chose to send her here. What's that one thing that you love being a teacher? What excites you?
So a couple of things. I really loved seeing the dramatic growth, especially when I taught first grade, which was not what my first choice was until I got there. But just the dramatic growth from when they get there, and they don't really know how to read, and the math is very, very limited and basic, and then watching the growth over time, over the year, that makes you feel like what you're doing matters and makes a difference. I loved that. I also loved just getting to know the kids. I used to have a really hard time with the last week of school. I would start grieving the loss of those kids like on the Monday before, and I would have to, my first couple of years, I actually would cry throughout the first week, but then it was traumatizing to the children because I'm crying, they're crying, and the last day was just so traumatic. So I would tell myself, I cannot, I have to keep it together for these kids. But you get so attached to them. You get so attached to them.
I agree. My daughter taught me how to be more patient in life. Like, what did you learn from these kids, from your kids or kids in the classroom?
So I think patience, yes, compassion, that every child is different. Every child has value. Every child has something to teach us. I'm a much better person because of my own children and the children that I have taught. I don't think anything, because you're so emotionally invested, I don't think anything could motivate you to grow like being a parent or a teacher, because you truly care about these kids and you want to be the best you can be. And certainly with my own children, when they had obstacles and things that they had to overcome, it gave me more compassion for other people's children and other families and the struggle that they go through. And it also helped me understand that children don't have to get good grades or be high performing or any of those things to have value. Just being a person is enough. I think that the longer that I've done this, the more I realize just every person has value, and I've grown huge compassion for children that struggle and families that struggle.
Can you share an experience or two with kids that made you think or adapt or change your perspective? Maybe like one example that's stuck with you.
Gosh, there's been so many of them. I think that when I was in school, the model was the teacher would get up and deliver a lesson, and if you didn't get it, then it was your fault, or you felt like it was your fault. And families would also believe that it was your fault or their fault. And I think now we've learned that if a child is not accessing what we're trying to teach them, then we need to do something different. We need to make adjustments and modifications and accommodations, because if we do those things, then they can learn and they can reach their potential. But if we don't do those things, then you have generations of people that have experienced trauma at school, and that trauma at school doesn't go away. If you've had a bad experience at school, or you were made to feel like you're not smart, or you don't have value, I've talked to a lot of adults where that trauma has not gone away. They still carry it as adults. And when I was a teacher, I would be places where people would say, well, what do you do? Oh, I'm a teacher. And they would want to tell me about the time that they were held back a grade level, or the time that they failed their test or their grade or their class, and I would think, I cannot believe that this person is still carrying that. But I think that's more common than not, that when the school system fails children, it causes trauma that never goes away. So we can't do that. You know, I there's a quote, Hiram something, Janot, I think, where he talks about the enormous power that a teacher has to harm or to heal.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. I know. What strategies did you use for misbehavior or conduct issues back when you were a teacher? And do you still use them as principal? Do they still hold
So
good?
the number one strategy or tool that I use, that I still use now, and I don't know how I picked this up, but from my first year. So I didn't have a lot of background in classroom management. I really didn't know what I was going to do if they didn't do what they were supposed to. But I knew if I could connect with them and build a relationship with them, that we would have an easier time with each other. If I could get to know the child and what they need from me, then they might care more what I need from them, and that together we could figure it out. And that has gone a long way, and I still use that with children, that if I could get to know the child and figure out what they need from me, then things go a lot better. And then incentives. I also learned early on that human beings acclimate to punishment. I mean, sometimes there's, we have to give consequences. But when you're constantly punishing, and human beings just acclimate to it. Like when you think of prison camps and things like that, the human spirit can survive anything. And so you're not going to get compliance that way. You're going to get survival. And the human spirit is so strong that when we treat people in a way that's punitive, they will find a way to fight back, even little kids. So to try really hard not to be punitive, because that creates a very bad relationship, no trust, it's a betrayal of trust, and it creates worse behavior. So if we could use incentives, human beings also, the brain loves rewards. So if we can create incentives, that works better. But the relationship piece is most critical.
Interesting. How do you handle conflict of opinion with staff or parents? You handle a lot of, like fires, a lot of issues on a daily basis. How do you handle them?
So I've read a lot of books about this, and I think what helps me is to understand that there's a problem to solve in all of this emotion. And the thing too is, there is nothing in this world that gets us more emotionally charged than our children. If we think that we need to protect our children from something, all reason goes out the window. And then we're coming from a place of extreme vulnerability, and emotions come out, and it comes out different for different people. So I've learned when someone is angry or upset, this is not about me. This is about a problem that we're trying to solve. We're trying to solve a problem. And I'm on their team. I'm on their side. I care about that child too. And I want to see their child feel comfortable and safe and successful too. And so I think the first thing is, don't take it personal. And then the second thing is working together as a team. And then also, if your focus is on solving a problem, then it's different than I'm being attacked and I need to protect myself, because that's not productive, and it's usually not what's happening. It's usually that this person is passionately trying to protect and advocate for their child. And some people know how to do that really well, and some people don't. And as a mom, I know what that is. I know how that feels. So if I can convince them that we're in this together, and I'm a good problem solver, then I think things get better.
That's a wonderful answer. I think it can be applied anywhere, like in any problems, not just the school setting. Another interesting thing that always makes me awe is like right after you became principal, COVID happened. Like everything has changed. We are middle of the pandemic. How did you handle all that? There's so many transitions. It has been closed, no information, training the teachers with online setup. How did you cope all that? And I know you have done a lot, I know you used to come by to some homes and drop off stuff. How did you manage all that?
So I think at first, nothing like this had ever happened. Like I've been in education since 1996. We've never, especially California, we had never shut down a school more than a day or two. And so in my mind, it was impossible that we were shutting down for weeks. I've never, as a child, as a teacher, impossible that this would happen. So I think at first, I felt like we were all experiencing a tragedy together. And so my first approach was, we need to hang on to some sense of community, that something bad is happening and it's happening to all of us. And none of us know what to do or how to navigate this. So we need to come together as a community. And then that whole idea of space and grace. Like nobody knows what they're doing. We've never been in this before. Let's give each other huge amounts of space and grace. And through that, we had to take risks and learn things and try things, and some of the things didn't work and some of the things did work. But I think it was even more magnified that it wasn't just Riverview and it wasn't just Folsom Cordova. It was literally the entire world was in this situation with us, which I think made it even more important that we come together as a Riverview community. That this is happening to the whole world, but if we can come together and support each other at this school, then we're gonna get through this. And some of it was, I think at the beginning, was denial. I thought, we'll close until spring break, and then we'll come back.
Yeah.
And then you're just trying to get through a hurdle that's a few weeks. And then they said May 4th, okay, another month, we'll get through this, but after spring break, that's when we did the Chromebook deployment. But I kept telling myself this is temporary. There's no way it's gonna go that long. And then we made it through the end of the year, and somebody said something to the effect of, well, you don't really believe we're coming back in August. And I did. I thought we were coming back in August. But through that summer, I realized this is long term. This is long term, and we have to learn how to navigate this for the long haul, which was there was a lot of anxiety. I know at that time we would have Zoom meetings with our administrators like every week, like sometimes 2 and 3 times. Like even, it was just constant, because everybody was desperately trying to hold this thing together for the kids and reduce the impact as much as we possibly could. But every day we were getting different news and different information and different messages, and so I think the most important thing was to stay together as a community. Like, we're all going through this together. So we did things like the drive-throughs and the porch drop-offs, and that was really neat too. I would drop off curriculum and materials at houses, and I wasn't supposed to knock on any doors because of exposure, but sometimes the kids would see me and waved through the window. Sometimes they would come outside even though we weren't supposed to be doing that, and so that felt like that we were still a community. We were still together. I started doing those videos. I felt like maybe they're watching, I don't know. And then on the Chromebooks, I would try to go into all their classes. I really liked that we wanted to do something for the community that was STEM. So one of the hospitals contracted with us to make 3D masks. And that felt like we were unique because we could provide this for our community, and hopefully the kids could see the value in these 3D printed things and things that they were learning how to do. But I think my mantra for a whole year was space and grace. Yeah. I'm going to give myself space and grace, and everybody else space and grace.
I feel like kids are more resilient than adults during that
Yes.
transition. It was very hard for them. All of a sudden everything has been shut down. They transitioned into video, online sessions, and then wearing masks for like several months. That's very hard, but we all came through it successfully.
Yeah.
Okay. My next question is, what learning stayed with you after COVID? Be it professional or personal, did you learn anything that stayed with you?
So I think one of the benefits was, even though we had physical distancing, I feel like I got closer with the parents, the families. I know, prior to that, I would just try to stay in my lane, do the best job I can do, not cross boundaries. And then with COVID, it was like so odd that we were physically distanced, but there was no boundaries. I would have parents calling me crying, and teachers crying, and people just losing it emotionally. And, I'm deploying all these Chromebooks basically by myself, and then the parents couldn't log on, and, and I'm getting all these phone calls, and I just realized we're just people. We're just people trying to get through this, and so what if the Chromebook doesn't work? So what? But being on the phone to try to offer emotional support, and it's going to be okay, that kind of stuff. And sometimes they would bring the Chromebook back, and then we would try to get on it together, and we weren't supposed to, because I wasn't supposed to be, but I think that idea that we're all people, and I need to do whatever I can to help, whatever it is, and there's no separate.
And you did a fantastic job handling it. We would never want any other principal other than you during COVID time. You're always one phone call away or one email away. We are blessed that way. And then I have always been curious to learn more about you. I know I used to talk a lot and ask more questions. For me, you're a woman who have it all. How do you do that? How do you manage work-life balance? How do you always be so calm and humble and empathetic? How do you do it?
I don't. So I don't know. I think gratitude certainly helps. Just being grateful for everything, being grateful for the school, being grateful for my children, my family. Just I think gratitude helps a lot. I think it helps that my work is something that I truly love, and it pairs well with my family. So things that my children are going through that I learn about helps me in my job. Things in my job that I learn about helps me with my children. So they're not as separate as some careers. They kind of go together. The whole idea of empathy and compassion, I also have to give that to myself. That sometimes balls are going to drop, and things are not going to get done, and we just do the best we can. And especially with my own children, that their well-being is more important than anything, whether or not my house is clean or the laundry is done, or their well-being is more important than anything else I do, because when this job is over, and hopefully I'll leave some kind of impact, but the most important impact is the impact on my own children. So it's important to me, because I love this job and I could let it consume me easily, that I'm mindful that when I'm home, I need to be 100% home.
Yeah, and that's the hard part.
Yes.
Yeah. Could you share a few struggles that you overcame? It helps working women who are listening to or viewing this podcast that they're not just alone. Like everyone comes or handles struggles, right? Are you comfortable sharing a few struggles? Like it could be juggling work and home, or like work challenges at work.
So I've had, I guess one of the things is I had physical illness that I dealt with. So I think growing up, I had this idea that I used to ride my bike in this neighborhood that was had really nice houses, and it was nicer than where I lived. And we had a decent house. My dad worked hard. But I would ride my bike and I would see these nice cars and these nice homes, and I would think, when I grow up, I'm gonna live in a house like that, and I'm gonna have a car like that, and somehow in my head, I thought that these people never struggled. Like if I could have that much money, or I could have that much education, or I could have that good job, I'll never struggle. And so I think I chased that for a long time. And when my son was 3, in 1 week, this is 1 week of his life, we were flagged for Kaiser for possible autism. And this is a child, he was my rainbow baby. So this is a child that I had multiple tries to get. So that was hard. Then his nanny, 2 days later, it was his birthday, and his nanny overdosed. Combination, not quantity. And so that was a huge blow. And I found out that I had breast cancer all in the same week, literally in 7 days. And I thought, I have more education than I've ever had at a master's degree. I have more money than I ever thought that I would have. And as a teacher, I wasn't rich, but I had more money certainly than my parents did. I have more things, houses, cars, assets, than I imagined. And I'm struggling in ways that I could not imagine. And so I think that was pivotal for me, that struggle is a part of life. It brings us together as people. It bonds us with each other. If you have a faith that you follow, it brings you deeper into your faith. But it also, again, that gave me perspective that we have a very limited amount of time here, and we really need to focus on the impact that we have with the people that we come in contact with, because you don't know really how much time you have. And if the impact that you left is that you were judgmental or too busy, or you made somebody feel like they didn't have value, then that's the impact that you leave with, and it's forever. But if you're intentional about leaving an impact where you demonstrated empathy and compassion and patience, and you made somebody feel like they had value that maybe was struggling with that, or you were part of someone's healing, boy, is that an impact. That's an incredible impact.
Wow. That's, yeah, I'm speechless. In one of your articles, you wrote about a thought-provoking question, like just what you said. You said, ask yourself every day, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? That blew me off, like every day if we practice that question, if we ask ourselves, we would be a better person.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like you to say in your own words how that rings, like how, give me more detail about that. How do you think about, and how do you want the kids to ask this, or train the parents to, so that we can have better kids, better humans when they become adults?
So I think one of the things that I realized is, one of the things I realized after my grandmother died is I would find myself doing things that were like her. And I never questioned where these things came from. So I have a real strong work ethic. I have a drive, I was born with this drive, which as a child, parenting a child that's really driven is not pleasant. I was always really, really driven, and had this really strong work ethic. And I thought my grandmother was like that. She was a survivor. No matter what, she was gonna figure it out and make it happen. And so a lot of little things like that I saw, like, why am I like this? Even if it was good, bad, or otherwise, why am I like this? Why? And I realized that generationally, the material things that we leave are probably just going to be squandered. Like I try really, my husband and I try to leave our children assets, but those things are probably going to be squandered. And he's way more focused on that we have to leave them all. And I think what matters and what lasts, especially when you're talking about generationally, is character, dispositions. Those things are passed on generationally. And so I think those things are really important. And so I think that there is a point when we can be really intentional about what kind of legacy we're going to leave. So no matter who you are. And so what I would like is my grandchildren's children, when I'm long gone, to have the very best of what was good about me in their lives, in their minds, not even knowing why or where it came from.
Wow, yeah, that's profound. That's so deep. That's good. I'm going back to the COVID time. During COVID time, you posted your opinion on social media. Like, it was the times when people are hoarding toilet paper and some commodities, even though it's not a necessity. And then I saw you loaded your truck full of food and gave it to food bank. And then you also expressed gratitude to people who helped you when growing up. It was like 2 weeks into the pandemic, and I did check the date just to make sure I was right. So it's like going out of the house was like seemed scary, but what made you do that? Why did you do that at that point of time?
So I think what I saw is I saw people becoming paranoid. And so I think two things. I think that what we believe about ourselves and about humanity manifests. So if you think that you aren't enough, or that you don't have value, that manifests. If you think that people are bad, you will find those people. If you think that the world is scarce, it will become scarce. So I feel like everybody's becoming paranoid, and I have to fight against this. I have to refuse to buy into this belief system. And the best way I could do that is by taking action that's in opposition to that, and then posting it publicly. Like, we are not going to hoard toilet paper. We're losing our minds over here. Yeah. And it's going to cause mental health problems, which we know it has.
Yeah.
Huge mental health problems. This is going to make us nuts, and it's going to make us turn on each other. And we have to fight against this. And it could be something as simple as, I'm going to give my toilet paper away. You have to do that. And I will say too that one of the things I would advise anybody is sense of humor is everything. And so I think finding the joy in life is important. So is finding the humor. And so the idea that and my husband's really good. That's probably why I've married him. He's so funny. I think the humor was, oh my goodness, we're all hoarding toilet paper. Yeah. We've lost our minds. Yep. And so I thought I need to take some action so that if one person stands up in opposition, other people will feel like, what am I doing? Yeah. And do the same. And then the mindset will change, or at least challenge what is happening here. Yeah. And I did predict, and we have seen, we are literally going nuts over here. Yeah. And we have to stop. And so I felt like I'm gathering up all my toilet paper and all the food that I know I don't need, and in an act of faith, I'm going to give it away instead of hoard it. And it felt really good. It felt like we're going to be okay.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I felt that interesting when life is going the other way, especially with toilet paper. You seem to be like, okay, let's do this. Enough of this, and it's interesting. I like the perspective of manifesting. And then I am a firm believer of gratitude, and I know you too. Why do you think gratitude is important, and how has that helped you in your life?
So I think that I've done a lot of reading on gratitude, and what I know is you could have literally everything, an abundance of everything, and if you don't practice gratitude, it's never going to be enough, and you're never going to find happiness. Or you could have almost nothing. But if you can practice gratitude for whatever little thing that you have, you're going to find happiness in that. I think happiness lives in gratitude. And it doesn't matter how much you have.
Like they say, count your blessings.
Yes.
And how can we inculcate in gratitude in our lives? I feel today's kids, like I won't say most kids, I won't generalize, but some kids have more toys than needed, more stationery than needed. I want them or my child to be more grateful. How can we inculcate that in our kids' lives?
So I think one of the things is giving, like when I loaded up the car.
Yeah.
So one of the practices that I did when my children were little is before Christmas, when they were going to get gifts. So they would, first of all, they would have to give up some things that they had. And so we would do a lot of donating, and then and donate in a way that you're not giving trash to people, because that is demeaning. You're giving something that you like, that has brought you joy, because giving somebody something that's brought you joy is a different kind of giving, and it makes you feel good. Giving something that you know is trash is demeaning and should not feel very good. And so we would do that, and then also we would do the giving tree and things like that. So I think when they have an abundance, pointing out that other people don't have any is helpful, and then having conversations about what do you have that has brought you, even if it's one thing in your room, what do you have that's brought you so much joy that you want to give that to someone else? I think also helps. But I think with children, it's hard for them to understand that other people don't have things. So I think we have to intentionally expose them to that.
Yeah, I feel that's the best way to know that there are other people who are underprivileged or who needs those toys which they have abundant. Yeah, I agree with that. Right, again, I'm jumping back to your grandmom. I know you're very fond of her. Could you share some experiences with your grandmother that shaped who you are today?
So she had a lot of struggle that I haven't had. But I admire the way that she dealt with all of that. She was in an orphanage. She got married very, very young, and she got married, I think she was 15. She had 4 children in like 10 years and no real formal education. And then her husband was an alcoholic and a adulterer and left. So here she is. She's got 4 children, no education, and just somehow made it. Went to work, found a job at the grocery store that was nearby. She didn't drive. She never drove her entire life. Got a job at the Ralph's grocery store. Had a really good sense of humor, was really quick to laugh. Stayed in that house because she was sure her husband was coming back. Stayed in that house for 40 years. And just the perseverance and the grit and the sense of humor, and she would see ladies at work that would get another husband, and the commitment to her children, that she didn't want to risk a man being unkind to her children, that independence that she had, all of those things I really admire. And she was very frugal, and somehow, they had a stock option at her work. So when she retired, this is like in the 70s, and she had like over $1 million and this house in North Hollywood that they paid $20,000 for, that was worth just enormous amounts of money. And so she sold everything and traveled all over, and did that for a long time. and just her sense of adventure and her loyalty to her children, and just really powerful example to me. And she always wanted to be a nurse, but she had no education, and then was working from like her 20s until she retired. So she would retire. So she would volunteer at the hospital when she retired, when she wasn't traveling, and she would walk. I don't even know how many miles it was to get to this hospital, because to realize her dream of what it would be like. And then and so I just, there was a lot of the resilience.
Wow. Yeah.
It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very inspiring. Okay, we are coming to closer to the end. Please share us, parents, some tips that make teachers' life easy. We feel we want everything for the kid, we try to push, but what is it that makes teachers' life easy? Like from the parents' side, how can we help the teachers?
So I think being a partner. So I think teachers, like anyone, they appreciate validation. That when we appreciate something, let them know. I think they also appreciate the partnership. I know I taught here 1 year, the first year they opened, and what I was struck by is how the parents would want to work with me. Like if their child was struggling with something, how they would just really want to partner and work together. So I think the partnership and the support, and then if a conflict arises, I think understanding that the teacher cares about your child and they want to help and they want to be part of the solution. I think that teachers need that, because I know sometimes when there's conflict, it feels like us against them, and I know that's very wearing for teachers, because they are, they care about. I can tell you, we were at a happy hour in right before school got out, and we were celebrating our teacher of the year, the people that we voted, and I was sitting at the happy hour listening to the conversations, and the teachers, I'm not kidding you, were talking about the kids, how much they love the kids. And they were talking about teaching strategies, things that they had happened, that they had tried that worked. And I thought, I wish the parents could see this, that these people, these adults are at a happy hour talking about your children and how much they love them. That I wish the parents could see that.
Yeah, I know. There would be like sometimes where the teacher complains or sends notes to a particular child, but I know the parent takes it personal.
Yes.
So in those how can we tell, or how can we calm, or what should the parents know if the teacher has been giving notes or giving like telling there's something wrong with, not wrong, I would say. What should the parents do in order to help the child instead of taking it personally?
So that is a hard one. That is a hard one. I think, so even though you might, because again, your child is the most vulnerable part of you. And so our instinct is to protect them. But I think trying to step away from that and trying to figure out what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And then communicating with the teacher that way. So I think asking the teacher, trying to get to a situation with the teacher where you're working together, I think is important. And I'm not going to say that I personally haven't had situations with teachers where I felt personally attacked, because I have. I think that's just part of being human. But if I respond defensively, or if I respond with the emotion that I'm feeling, it's going to be so much worse.
Yeah.
It's going to be so much worse. And I remember one time driving my daughter to school, and there was this field trip and this conflict with the teacher, and it was just getting uglier and uglier. And I remember driving my daughter to school. I think she was in 5th grade, and I said, I feel like I need to back away from this. I feel like what happened is not as important as the way I'm responding. And so even though I feel like I'm right and the teacher's behaving badly, there's a chance that I'm behaving badly too. And the most important thing, or more importantly, is I want my daughter to have a good relationship with the teacher. And if I keep coming at this thing defensively and it keeps escalating, I'm going to feel worse. It was not making me feel better. Mm-hmm. I'm going to feel worse. And my daughter, her situation is not going to get better.
Yeah, that's wonderful. What advice would you give to young working moms?
To young working moms, I would say, and I mean, this is the truth. No job is as important as your children. There's not a career or a job on this planet that is more important than your children. So even though jobs and careers give us a sense of purpose, they give us, they help us grow as people. There's a lot of important things about working and having a career. Achieving things feels good, but that child needs to feel those things too. And you have more impact on that child than anyone else that will ever be in their life. And so even though the balance is hard, that child is more important. And so there were times in my life where I was just getting caught up with my goals and objectives, like, I want to be a principal and I have to do this and this, and I have to, where I checked myself is when I would start to feel like my own children were a problem or a burden. Then I was like, whoa, what are you doing? What are you doing here? And if you're thinking this, they feel it.
Yeah. Wow. That's very nice. Well said. I'm going to close this now. Thank you very much for answering my questions, and we might come back again.
Okay.
I have so many other things to know. But thank you very much for your time, Mrs. Powell.
Thank you.
I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.